Now let's try a more ambitious test of your imagination.
One of the things that's cool about Chicago is that you have all these people that we're all living in this somewhat condensed area of space, and people are coming and going, and there's a rhythm to the city, and there are these things that were built in 100 years ago, these things from the past that we're all still living with, and we have access to them, these beautiful things, and you can see the way that the elements antique these things and age these things, and it's really beautiful. And there are certain elements of it. There are things that have been around for years and years, and there's just this huge mix of people. There's all these different things going on, and everybody just creates their own realm within that space, that swirling space of all these seemingly chaotic things. People find these ways of organizing their lives. The time machine started a few years ago, and the idea is that there's a time traveler staying with my great-grandfather in 1901, and he disappeared, and so what happened was I inherited these machines through my great-grandfather, and I'm finding these machines, and they're starting to work now, and I'm repairing them, and they're beginning to take you to different dimensions through time travel. The machines are paintings on canvas or masonite. Then I take antique hardware and mount different objects to the surfaces or the exterior, and I paint through the surface. So sometimes there'll be like a real tube, and then once it gets into the canvas, then it's a painted tube. And I'm playing with the ideas of perception and creating depth and space through juxtaposing different textures and surfaces. A really smooth surface, typically in the center, very tranquil space, and then a lot of times the frames will be very rough, or they'll be, the painted surfaces will be very, like using plasters and heavier things to create a rough surface. That against the smooth surface creates a space. What I'm trying to do is to bring people in that get up close to the piece. It draws you in, and as you get closer, you're not sure what's reality and what's paint. The IV Lab is a recording studio in Chicago that's in an old bank vault, this awesome space, and they commissioned me to do a piece. So what I did was I distressed the walls, and I painted the walls, and then I did paintings in the studio on canvas, installed them, and then painted things around it. So it's a landscape that goes around the whole room. It starts from the left, and there's a rural scene. It represents the past, and as the narrative goes around the room, these alien devices start growing in the fields, and they start recording over the pasture. So the future is actually recording over the pasture, and then there are tape reels that are on the surface of the canvas, and they come out of the sides. So it integrates the paint. It's painted here, and then it comes into real tape. So it goes in and out of the painting, and then at the end it culminates in these two exchanges of some type of alien intelligence shooting this beam of sound between each other. And the tubes come in and out, and then the tubes are going into the wall. So you have this tube that comes in, goes into the wall, then and the painting starts here. So I painted this black tube on the wall, and then it meanders off. What I'm trying to do is convey this sense of this futuristic machinery coming in, and then that futuristic machinery juxtaposes with this antique pastoral landscape. So you get a separation of the futuristic and the past in one thing. The Futura Obscura show was a show opening that I just recently had, and I put together a live painting installation. And so I installed the piece prior to the show, and then when the opening night I painted live, and I showed people how I was producing the piece. I like the performance idea of it. It answers a lot of questions. It answers more questions than I can talk about. It's just showing the process, the nature of creating something like that. The alley is a magical alley. The week before the Futura Obscura show, I walked out and I found a table that was the centerpiece for the show, and there was a couch a couple days later, and it had this beautiful scroll work that flows out, and it was perfect. And those two together, they're in the same block, and I thought that's clearly going to be the show. I created a piece of art to give back to the alley gods, and it's a small window mural, and it looks like you're opening up to the sea. You have this old garage door that's falling apart, and the kids are tagging it, and there's all this, this graffiti on it. And so I wanted to see something where it opens up the space instead of it being a closed off quadrant. I thought it would be cool to open it up and look through it and see something beyond the wall. The city is an amazing space. One of the things that connects the city is the L tracks, and so it's this elevated train that commuters use, and it's on these arching spaces, these big metal beams that arc up. A lot of the aesthetic that I'm working on, like the Futura Obscura stuff, the shape is reminiscent of the L. So you have this arching feel, and the wings. That's the L. I've tried to recreate these notions of this heavy steel from turn of the century that's rusting, and as it gets closer to the edges of the rust, you can see colorizations. There are these different colors, and so I've tried to capture that in my work. I look at how things have decayed, what time does to different things. With the Obscura show, the installation, you see how the L has influenced that, this design aesthetic of this big, heavy, massive structure coming up but arcing out, and having this intense weight, but you also have this very delicate line work and this very beautiful these ornate lines that I like to bring together and create a sense of delicacy and also weight at the same time. In my studio, I have a wall that I work on, and it's an ongoing work in progress, and I try out things. I experiment on the wall to get the color palettes for pieces, and it's just this massive piece that has developed around the room. It's been an ongoing thing, for years and years. You had a question?
Ha ha ha!